December 12th work session. At this time, we'll start with prayer by Marie Manning.
Our Father, creator of heaven and earth, sent to us as a baby that we spend time this season honoring, celebrating what he did. We just thank you, Lord, for the good meeting that we've had, for the recognitions, for the good work of the committees that have been working for the curriculum in the state of Alabama. And we just praise you for all of those who have given so much of themselves and their time. We ask that you be with us in this meeting, that everything we do and say would be appropriate and proper. Bless us as a board. Keep us in your hand. Bless the workers of this department. And Lord, we just thank you for everything. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Since Dr. Mackey has not made it here, we will adjust the order of the agenda. The agenda will remain as printed. We will jump down to item number 9. I see Dr. Hamilton is here. Announce the intent to adopt the new Alabama Administrative Code, Chapter 290-3-3, pertaining to educator preparation. Thank you, Dr. Hamilton.
Good. Is it still morning?
Yeah.
All right. Good morning, everyone. How are you? Thank you for the opportunity to come and sit before you today. I want to begin first by thanking the leadership, Dr. Mackey, Ms. Martin. I want to thank our legal team. I want to thank my supervisor, Ms. Siobhan Harris. And I want to thank my colleagues who put up with me every day as we went through this process. Dr. Lemansky Walker, who's here. Dr. Walker, if you will. Thank you, sir. And we have one other. She couldn't join us today, Ms. Kelly, Dr. Kelly Schumack. She retired as dean at AUM, and she's retired personnel with us here now. And they worked relentlessly on this project with me. I have several other people here I would like to thank, and I will thank them when I get to that slide, and I will recognize them at that moment. So without further ado, may we begin? All right. So, first thing, this did not happen in isolation. No way that we could have done this in this manner. Today, I have several individuals. They say, you know, you have not because you asked not. Well, I asked, and they resoundingly responded. I sent an email, told them that we would be discussing this at the work session today. They have been involved lockstep barrel through the process. And so will all my representatives from the 24 EPPs throughout the great state of Alabama please stand. Thank you, and thank you for your support. So, when we look at this code, what is different? Our previous code, we had several rules that had a great bit of rigidity. So they did not allow the EPPs to do certain things, and much of it was stifling their enrollment, their ability to be creative, their ability to be innovative. We wanted to change that. The other thing, we have had some changes in state legislation, and we wanted to be responsive to that. As you know, we have our Literacy Act, we have our Numeracy Act, we have our Alternative Teacher Preparation Organization legislation, we have DEI legislation. So we had to go in and make changes based upon those things that have come forward. We wanted to have the institutions an opportunity to create curriculum that's going to be meaningful, purposeful, and that's designed to enhance candidate knowledge, not just their knowledge base, but their ability base as well. So throughout the programs, as we've been going around to each of the EPPs to discuss things with them, talk to them, what we're finding is that several of them have ways that they would like to do things in terms of their field experiences, so that candidates have more of an opportunity to marry the content and pedagogy with what they're observing in the schools and what they're seeing to be better prepared for the challenges of the schools. We wanted that opportunity to exist. We wanted to look at the standards, and what we began to notice is, unlike the course of study that's approved, when we started looking at the standards, they're changing on a rolling basis. This code covers all content areas. And if we had been too specific with the standards, what we would have had to do is come back to you every year with a major revision. And instead of doing that kind of revision process, we decided to do it with the major headings that encompass those standards and leave that specificity where institutions can go and pull that course of study that's appropriate, that's been revised. They can go to those standards that have been revised for each of those areas. We want to address the teacher shortage. As we look, this is still a looming problem. So how are we going to create rules that allow the faculty, the staff at EPPs, the administration, to go through and design programs that are going to address the areas of greatest needs where they live and they offer their programs? Also, accreditation demands. Right now, sitting here in December 2024, I'm very happy to report that every EPP has gone through the K process in Alabama, and every EPP has had a report sent to the council to recommend that they be fully accredited with no stipulations. That is a major feat. Be proud of. The other thing, we don't want to have something that is going to put our EPPs at a disadvantage. So we have programs where an individual can get certification through testing, but they can't get that at a Class B or the initial undergraduate route at one of our programs. Well, we wanted our programs at our EPPs to have the right to have those opportunities to create those programs as well. And we want to require Class A and Class AA standards to be met at advanced levels. So for many of our content areas, there are not necessarily advanced standards, but when you change the verbiage and you say that they must meet it at this level, for example, you start looking at Bloom's taxonomy, you look at Davison's framework, it'll tell you the advanced levels that someone can meet each of the standards that have been presented, and we wanted to include those opportunities. So there's also an organizational change. One thing we noticed with the previous code was we had a bit of repetitiveness. And when you start looking through that, sometimes it got confusing because people would email me at some of the EPPs would say, on this page it says, on this page it says. So I'm not quite sure which page I'm supposed to follow. And I just scratch my head, go to the restroom, sit there for a minute and say, I don't know what page they're going to follow anyway. That was the truth of the matter. I did not know. And so I said, we got to make some sense out of this. So we looked at that to have those repeated areas deleted so that we're saying it originally in the beginning sessions under college and university requirements. Other thing, we expanded the definition some because that should be clear immediately when someone goes in, those definitions that are applicable to the code. Some of the sections are grouped together. So now we have all our Class Bs, of course. We have our A, alternative A, and then our AA. The only section in the code that may seem a bit out of place is our last one, which is on our ATPO. Reason, we're not quite sure if legislation is finished with that one. So we wanted it to have it at a place where it's accessible. So if we had to make changes, we didn't have to go back and revise the entire code. Then each section now has similar headings. They have a rationale, the program curriculum, those field experiences that are required, the faculty that are required for that area. And the reason we wanted this is because we noticed it was a little disjointed, where some areas you may have this information, but it doesn't quite say that. Then I'll get a call, well, it doesn't tell me for library and media how many faculty I have to have, they must meet these credentials. And I'm looking at the code, I'm like, well, no, it doesn't. So do I assume? I'm like, oh, bad thing making an assumption. But we wanted that guesswork removed. So we went back and made sure that was parallel. And the standards now, as I said, are presented as broad headings. That way, when each of the major areas go through their revisions, it doesn't mean a full code revision. So what do we keep? I talked a lot about what's gone, what's kept. We have a focus on several things. Your content knowledge, pedagogical delivery, and not just the pedagogical delivery that they are providing in the classrooms at the institutions, but how are they instructing candidates to go out and give quality pedagogical delivery. Quality assessments. And with those assessments, not just that you have some because they meet this. What is your data saying? Have you examined it? And if you look at your data and it tells you that we need a key assessment focused on this, that's a key assessment that you should have. Also, with your qualitative research, you bring in your partners. If your partners say in the school districts that you serve that we need a greater focus on classroom management, which is across the board in the United States, period. But classroom management, we need more focus on that. We need special education not to just be standalone, but we need to embed it as a thread throughout the program. Then you revise your program based upon the needs that you have and what your students need as well. There's not a one-size-fits-all with any of our EPPs. They are as unique as they are in number. And so those candidates that come into one EPP look vastly different from another. One institution, I may have candidates coming in with an average ACT score of 28. Another institution, I may have open enrollment and their average ACT score may be 16. What you're going to have to do to meet the needs of those individuals coming in at a 16 to bring them to the point where they can be successful on assessments, much different than what you must do to help this person that's at a 28. But customize your program to look like that. Provide those things that are absolutely essential for your success. Then, without testing for certification requirements, of course, ACAP, we've kept it there. Now, Dr. Peacock gets a little indigestion when I tell her that one of the next big hurdles we're going to be looking at is some of our assessments in Alabama. Are we using the right ones for all the areas? But that's something we need to stay on the cutting edge and examine so we can make sure that when those individuals finish a program, they have demonstrated on the appropriate assessments, they have the knowledge base necessary to go out and be effective. Then with program approval, it's absolutely necessary that an EPP be able to demonstrate that what they're doing is quality. And we don't want to remove that piece ever. But the way for it to be done has just changed. An innovative approval program process. I can't tell you how many of our institutions have brilliant minds over there thinking just about another program they can do a little bit different, they can tweak, they can combine, they can offer something innovative. I get them all the time. So let's look at that process and see how we're going to revise that process and make it a more seamless process for them. So what we had in terms of continuous improvement before was our CHIP process, which stood for Continuous Improvement in Educator Preparation. Some of the people behind me may have thought CHIP was a bad word at one time. Reason being, CHIP tend to be a bit prescriptive, okay? It required course descriptions. Your course descriptions had to have certain words from the standards or else it was going to be deemed not met. You had to have these created assessments that often didn't align with the assessments that they needed for their national accreditation process. And it seemed like they were tug of war sometimes. The other thing, it didn't even require the validity and reliability to be presented for your assessments that you created for the CHIP process. And your field experiences, they had those, but they had very key points. Show me how you met technology in this field experience, how you met this, how you met that. And it was very rigid. It wasn't designed on what was necessary. As I said, it resulted in frustration, a lot of times confusion, and a lack of innovation. So what have we designed now? We have a new process called ALPI, and it's Alabama Program Improvement for Educators. With this process, we want EPPs to always keep continuous improvement at the front of their mind, to be engaged in what can we do to make sure we're meeting the needs of our candidates. Candidates have changed now. I remember years ago when in schools, you could not have your phone out. Teachers are now using phones in schools as part of the curriculum to help aid. Now, I know we talked about not having the phones in schools, but these kids are using them all the time. Chat, what is it, chat something? GPT, thank you, somebody help me. Okay, so Chat GPT, they are utilizing it. They are using it for documents. But how do we teach them to use it effectively and correctly and not to rely upon it? When we looked at the ALPI process, we wanted the EPPs to be able to provide these assurances that they are offering quality programs that have been aligned to the standards. Want the key assessments to align with their CAPE key assessments as well, but also to aid in candidate preparation. So as I said, that one size fits all didn't fit all institutions. If your average ACT score is a 28, you have an assessments where you're trying to just simply work on candidates understanding more of the content they've already demonstrated by having an average score on the praxis that's very high that they know. Maybe there are other things that may need to be focused on at the institution. Maybe they need to focus on, let's see, how do we engage our candidates in the MTSS process so that those students that need additional assistance throughout the curriculum will know exactly what they need to do. Maybe they need to be focused on how do we ensure that all learners have opportunities to engage in the learning experience and benefit from it. So it's going to be a little more customized. The dispositions, candidate dispositions are so important. One of the things that I often say is this: you can know a lot about a lot of things, but if you don't have the heart to teach it to someone else, you're not going to be successful. Teaching blends not only that knowledge base that you have, but it also brings forth your ability to connect with others, your relational skills. And so how do you help to build those in your candidates so that they are prepared? Your field experiences need to be linked to on-the-job preparedness. As you know, we now have apprenticeship programs. Many of our EPPs are engaged in that as well. So how are they doing things in the classroom that connect with how they are going to prepare P through 12 students? It's going to be aligned with our CAPE requirements. As you know, with the Literacy Act, they all have to be CAPE accredited, and they are there. Validity and reliability of their EPP creative assessments. How are you measuring this? And how are you doing it on an ongoing basis to make sure that those are still reliable assessments that you have? Then EPPs are going to be able to make changes. So if the data says this, then the data, they need to look at that. How do we go through and say, all right, yes, we had a classroom management course. Now we have classroom management in each of our methods courses, so that you're talking about classroom management in a science class looks a little bit different than classroom management possibly in a history course. When you're in the lab, there are certain things that students just can't do. It's a safety risk, it's a hazard. And so how do you focus on those things as well across the curriculum to benefit that? And it utilizes a combination of document, submission, and visit components. All of our EPPs have told us, we did a survey after we did the visit at each institution we've gone to so far, and I'm happy to say we visited 19 of the 24. We have 5 remaining. And in those surveys, the EPPs have told us how much the visit has helped them, how much benefit they found from being able to sit down and have authentic conversations without fear of, well, there's going to be consequences because you told us that this is a problem for you and you're working on this. So we want to keep that piece as a part of the process. Some of the other changes, faculty requirements. I came to Ms. Harris and I said, Siobhan, we have 30 hours at the graduate level that faculty must have if they don't have a terminal degree. And when I look at the average terminal degree, it's not close to having 30 hours in that discipline. Where did this 30 come from? So Siobhan did some research and told me, well, at the time that their requirement was put in place, that was the average that people had. And I said, so we've kept the requirement this long because it was an average. So we went and started doing some digging. We looked at APE to see what APE said. We looked at SACS to see what SACS said. And we looked at other states to see what they were doing. Overwhelmingly, what many states are doing is if the faculty can demonstrate that they meet the requirements for SACS COC or whatever accreditor in their region that they are using, then they will utilize that as a part of the process for approval. The other thing, when we looked and started talking about some of the new legislation that have been proposed, I'll take numeracy for example. One of the things that the committee and the task force continually emphasize is that their experience is so critical when it comes to numeracy. Have they worked with this? Do they have the skills and ability and the knowledge base that Dr. Anderson has beat into me this productive struggle? We were just in South Alabama on Monday, and Dr. Barlow tried to make me a mathematician. I didn't tell her I was going to conform to that yet, but these are the things that they are looking at. So how do we make the faculty requirements more aligned with what's going on nationally? Then, of course, we have the legislation. We removed that DEI-related language while still having a focus on candidates being prepared to teach all students. Greater focus, as I said, on classroom management. There's been a change in GPA allowances. So prior to, we had very strict 2.75 to get in here, 3.25 for this. What we found when doing some of the research is that some individuals made, and Dr. Peacock hates these emails, where they have heart bleeds, a 2.746, and they can't get into a program. They write us and tell us that they are a 5th generation supposed to be teacher because they're a great Meemaw. And it is heart-wrenching because you have a teacher shortage right now, and you have individuals that want to be educators that can't get in. Well, let's look at other things. If someone, when they graduated from college at 22 years old, may have played and partied a little too much, and they may not have that GPA, wants to become a teacher and we're preventing them, but now they're capable of going through doing a 4.0 with a graduate program because they've had life experiences that have taught them some maturity. We need to provide some opportunities. And what we've done is rewritten some things to allow those opportunities for individuals to come in and demonstrate that they have the expertise and they have the ability to be successful. Yes, ma'am.
Is it a good time for a question?
Whenever you want to ask a question, it's a great time.
I'm familiar with the situation, and the guy who's been teaching in private school for quite a while
Yes, ma'am.
does not have the college GPA to get into one of these programs. Is that something that might happen now? Is that what you're saying?
If this code is passed, that's something that will possibly happen. Yes, ma'am. Now, what it depends on is the rules are there. They are the discretionary, the floorboard. What institutions have the ability is put in those ministerial requirements above that say, okay, well, the code allows you to have this, but we still say you need a 2.75. We can't prevent an institution from that. Sure. But there are going to be several institutions that say this is going to help several individuals that would like to be admitted to our program. We are going to allow this option. So yes, ma'am, there will be some options available for that.
Okay.
Absolutely. If the code passes. And again, yes,
And
ma'am.
that's next month.
No, ma'am, this has to go out for that public comment period, and so after that occurs, yes, ma'am. Okay. As we've talked about, that flexibility is going to be there. The other thing, we had a lot of things in the code that were just historical information. Well, one thing we do is keep the old codes on our website. Every one of the last old codes, for at least the last 4 versions, we have on our website. So that's not going to go away. We're going to still have those. But rather than repeating and just being redundant in this version, we've removed a lot of that. We've talked about the language and the continuity with the standards. So now, any other questions?
No, well done.
Thank you so much.
I read the code, and I'm just sitting here because some of the people out there I worked with as a previous dean, and I'm sure they are shouting. You know, all I can think about when I read it was, for a split second, I said, well, maybe this is a good time to come out of retirement. But I quickly, readjusted. But I just want to commend the efforts, the collaboration, and I've heard different deans from various universities speak about the change, the transformation that's going on. And so I just want to commend you and Siobhan Harris and Angela Martin, the whole team, for what you're doing. And I guess I'm speaking personally because I remember Chip, and Chip just about chipped everybody out. And so I'm excited about what I just witnessed.
Dr. Chestnut.
Yes.
If I may add, when Dr. Hampton opened up, what she was so modest and didn't disclose is that starting in 21, when I actually took this position, I think there were some emails already parked with a delivery date on them, and it was about Chip, as well as the Ed Prep. And we spent probably, Siobhan, I would say 1.5 years trying to work really hard to get a good committee together that was able to review. Many of the faces that are sitting out here now representing the EPPs are not the ones that were in place. So the transition of various individuals is part of what we had, part of our challenge, I'm going to say. But this committee worked really hard, and I am so appreciative of my meetings with Siobhan and Dr. Hampton on the feedback coming from them. And we were able to incorporate much of their ideas about making good candidates for our education field. So I am very thankful, and I tell you, many of you guys know you had those emails sitting parked with a delivery date to come to Mrs. Martin to make certain that this get tackled, and it was one Chip and the review of the Ed Prep. It has been continuous, and it's been a pleasure to look at this work and look at it through different lenses, especially legislation and the change in our overall system, looking at what do we need to really instruct our boys and girls today. And I'm so appreciative of you all for taking a look at it in a different manner. So thank you.
I want to say real quick, leadership matters, and so I'm grateful for your leadership and the leadership of all those serving in our EPPs. But Dr. Mackey probably doesn't remember, but I would say 3 years ago, I said to him, you promise me this gets fixed. It's so complicated and a very difficult task that you've undertaken. And I just want to say thank you for keeping your word and not letting this just keep moving on, kick the can down the road, listen to the complaining and not addressing it. So I really value and appreciate your leadership in this matter, and I just want to say thank you, and I've never forgotten the promise that you made to me, David. So, and you said there are 24, and you visited 19
Yes, ma'am. And
Do
we
you
have the
have-
other 5 scheduled this spring.
this spring.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and so will we get a report back on how those visits?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Go, and we just want to stay engaged on this, and be very consistent, I think, in our messaging to all of those institutions. But I know you will, and I appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am. Just as the ones that recently have had visits and then had the various individuals from the EPP come and talk to you about their programs, that will continue. Because I think you found value in that as well,
Yes.
hearing about their programs and the great things
Yes.
that they are doing and their challenges potentially. So we will continue with that. And so we have recently visited some this term, but as you see, this was front and center. So I had to tell those EPPs, give me a moment, we will get to you as a presentation at the beginning of the year, but we did recently conduct a couple visits this term as well.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
great, thank you.
Absolutely.
I just want to applaud
No,
before
you
you
go
make
ahead,
your comments.
please.
Kudos to all of you who worked on this and Dr. Mackey. And you listened, I heard her say that, because I've heard from Chip, having to work through it myself, and colleagues that I'm looking at other institutions complaining about Chip. But as I look at what you're presenting today, the Alpine, I see where it's gonna make a difference. Field experiences, my chair is out in the audience, and we were just talking last week about how the field experiences needed to be related more to the student internship piece. And right now it isn't. But going forward with this flexibility,
Yes, ma'am.
we'll be able to mirror that.
Absolutely.
So you heard that, my chair. We'll be able to get that going. And other things that need to be changed. But I just want to say it's going to really make a difference, because in going through CHIP and trying to align it with Kate, my friend from A&M, we know how difficult that was. But now I can see going forward how we will have a better product out in our school districts because of the flexibility and us being able to make and look at the individual needs of our students based upon where we are.
Yes,
So thank you.
thank you.
And I think we've learned, as we were sort of mentioned at the board table, that when our constituents, our educators, our family members, and everybody in our higher ed truly believe we're listening to them and we're taking their input seriously. Now, does that mean we're going to agree to everything? But but just like in social studies and the library and the arts, it has been where the people who have called me or emailed me have said, thank you for at least listening. Did we agree on everything? No. But, it's sort of like in any mediation, if both sides are a little angst, then you did the right thing. But anyhow, so I applaud that, because it's across the board. We're not the best communicators, but I think we're truly improving because we're understanding the value in that. So I applaud you for that.
Thank you.
Well, I just say ditto to everything that's been said. As I said this morning, you just alluded to it. It's the same problem. We had the same problem that we had with courses of study. We were getting, through nobody's fault, but I saw it from the outside myself when I came in to be superintendent. We were getting a lot of, I'm going to say bad products. Not listen to. Don't let me go a little further before you. What do you mean bad products? But the outcome was hard. Was sometimes complex. Was not transparent because the process to get to the product was the problem. And I think that was frustration deans felt. It was the frustration that lots of community groups all over the state felt. It was no fault of any board members. It was no fault. It was no fault of anybody in the department. Nobody sat down and said, how do we make these processes so complicated that they frustrate everybody? It was a matter of years of laying one thing on top of another, on top of another, on top of another, until the process itself was inefficient, and so everybody was frustrated with the product. And I think that's something we did try very early on to start making a change on. Then COVID kind of got everything off. But what you're seeing is the fruition of not just better products at the end, like library and the library standards and the 2 courses of study, and now this. It's working, it is building the plane as you fly it. We're trying to build better processes but we can't just stop. So we couldn't stop training teachers in college and say, oh, for 3 years we just want training teachers. We had to keep doing what we were doing and build new, better processes. And I appreciate Dr. Hampton and these deans and the work they've done. I know in my letter to you all, I noted that one of my first meetings in this job was with a group of deans that were very frustrated with the process. And none of them are deans anymore. One of them was, we were going to try, I said, well, let's work on changing it. And kind of the person who spearheaded it moved on got a promotion and moved on. And then within a year, we were in COVID. And then so thank you all for saying we're going to tackle this and get it done. And board members for your patience in helping us get the process fixed. So I think we're on our way. Now this will be, we're in a transition period, as you all know. We're going to lose Mrs. Bell, Mrs. McCrae. So before this is finalized. So the process now would be, we'd bring this to you all in January, and we would put it out for the 45-day public comment period. But it couldn't be finalized until March. So we will probably, Dr. Chestnut, I'll work through this with you, with 2 new people who will vote on the final rule. My suggestion is probably we would come back, not do this exact same thing, but in February maybe, and kind of do an update for them so they know what we're talking about, because they have not been subjected to all the angst and phone calls and all that y'all have been.
Just right.
And so they can go back obviously and watch this too, but I think we'll need to kind of remember that as we go through that transition. We'll bring them up to speed. And I will send it to them after today's meeting, so they can go ahead and look over it, make sure they're aware of that.
Dr. Mackey?
Yes, ma'am, please.
First of all, I'm not lost, I'm actually
No.
know where I am.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
They lose somebody.
Not lost.
But anyway, I do want to just clarify, not that you were wrong, but you were in the classroom when I first started on this board, and I remember visiting you when you were a local superintendent. But we were, during all of those times, we actually did discuss a lot of this. And some of it, we were actually held back because of laws that had been put in place and a lot of archaic, and they weren't, I don't want to be too critical, but they were just not forward thinking in terms of what we can expect in the future. And each institution at that time, we had to even though we were overseeing the 2-year colleges, we actually had to meet to bring the 2 together at that time. And then it was very healthy, and we did a lot to make a big difference, including dual enrollment, which was welcomed by colleges and universities. But the other part, in our 2-year system, obviously, but the other part of that is the fact that we had to work in addition to what AIC was doing. And I used to cover that as a reporter, so I was real familiar with their oversight. But the bottom line there was that you had divisions all over the place, and the colleges were having to deal with those divisions, and people were overlapping with requirements. And of course, the independent boards of trustees were setting their own policies in different departments at the recommendation of the deans. And so it was not that the board didn't recognize that there could be a better plan. It was that there were so many restraints that we had to work through. And it has been refreshing at this end of 30 years to see that there is camaraderie, there is cooperation, and there is a desire to move in a direction that benefits everyone. And that's what we couldn't work with at that time, because there was so much division. And so for past boards, and I've served with more than 30 plus board members, different ones, over the years, it was not a lack of interest or a lack of desire, but it was just that we didn't have the kind of team effort that we have now. And again, that didn't happen overnight. And I just want people to know that there was an effort to move forward with making changes where every institution was working together. And even with their own group, and some of you may know, but you're probably not old enough to know. But even within the institutions, there's a healthy kind of competition, and then there's one that breaks people apart, and it doesn't help anyone, and that's what we had to work with in the beginning. That's not to fault anyone, but that was just the environment. And it wasn't just in Alabama, it was all over the country. So from that standpoint, it is, on this end of my tenure on the board, it's positive for me, even though I will not have a voice from the standpoint of a vote. But I can say, well done, and I appreciate that effort. And I think in the future, if we understand, and it's real important because I know people go, oh, we have to go back to the past. It's important to understand the past, otherwise, you know, it's, I think it was Abraham Lincoln. I mean, it's, the bottom line is that what happens, it does make a difference for the future. And what we are doing is building on what other people had to build on. And it wasn't a fun time. I guarantee it was not a lot of fun. But we are benefiting, and I appreciate all the work that you put in, and everyone in the audience. I just think it makes a huge difference when we have that cohesive effort and one that is directed at making a positive difference where everyone benefits. But at the same time, we have to be careful that we don't open the gates too much in that process, because then we have to go back and kind of close them a little bit. Yeah. So anyway, I do appreciate it very much.
Thank you. And if I can say one thing, that's one thing we discussed as well, that pendulum that swings back and forth, and how to slow that pendulum down enough so that you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Exactly.
But rather you keep those elements that are absolutely essential for quality while allowing the flexibility necessary to be innovative.
And make sure that you don't lower the standards in teaching, because it is a valued profession. And we need to maintain that. Having taught in Taiwan, where among the Chinese culture, the teacher is the top of the echelon. And that's where it didn't matter whether I was, 5 feet, whatever, and I happened to be a woman at the time. But the bottom line was that I was a teacher. And that was more respected than really any other job in the culture. And that's where, if we want to maintain that kind, or even open the doors for that kind of respect, we have to also respect the profession and maintain those standards that don't lower it to the point where we want everyone to be a teacher, but we also want them to be well qualified and love the job instead of getting the paycheck. And, it's an easy one to get into. That's not. It shouldn't be easy. It should be one where you feel like you've accomplished great things once you receive your certification and you're in the classroom. But I'm not lecturing. I'm just saying, I definitely appreciate your work and how hard it has been.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We needed to hear that. We will go back. We just celebrate all of the universities represented here today. And thank you for your cooperation and collaboration. We have a lot of aspiring educators that I think will benefit from the efforts that we're seeing here today. Initially, I said we would skip to number 9. We'll go back to the beginning of the agenda and proceed accordingly. Dr. Mackey.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Chestnut. So you're going to see, we're going to get back to 8 really quickly, because these deans all want to hear number 8 too, I think. So 1 through 6, these are recognitions of our presidential award winners. Every year we recognize, we'll have 3 in math and 3 in science. We usually do a dinner to recognize them. Last year I think we went out to Wind Lakes. So they're still working on all of that, but we'll bring them to you in January, and we'll adopt resolutions for all of them, but still working on it. We used to do a luncheon, and we've kind of moved it around, so they're working on what that process is going to look like in the spring. But we are back to having those. As you know, that was on the federal level. We went through a period where they kind of didn't, they put that on hold, I think maybe because of COVID. but it's back. So you'll see those. We have several from District 3, and I think District 5 and there's another district, but 8, District 8. So you'll see those. Number 7, in next month, we'll have a resolution to recognize Career Tech Month in February. Now, like we did Gifted today, I know it's a little confusing, but because the meeting occurs and the month's already going, so we're trying to get on schedule where we announce this month's coming up before we start it. So this morning you did a resolution so that January will be Gifted Awareness Month, February will be Career Tech. We do have a big schedule for the February meeting, so you all know. I think you already know a little bit about. We've bought this truck, a huge semi that will be able to go around to rural schools, and it's a mobile lab. It's called GoPro. So we're going to have the truck here for the February board meeting, since that's Career Tech Appreciation Month. We'll have probably the FFA band as we have in the past and all of those. So we'll have several activities around that. They actually wanted to roll the truck out a little earlier, but I said, wouldn't it be great if we could do that on a board meeting day? The legislature will also be in session. We'll have the truck parked right out front here. So we're planning a lot around that for the February meeting. And then we're to 8, to the higher education report cards. And you have a big book. It is not truly a report card. I think Dr. Hampton may be coming. No. Dr. Hitchcock's coming to present on this. Let me say this as they get ready. Just a little introduction. We appreciate the work, again, our institutions do. The principals are involved in this because there's a recent graduate survey. But we are working on a more concise way maybe to truly put it in more of a report card and present in the future. It's because it's a lot of information. Now, to be fair, if you took we give you a list of school report cards, and you say, well, we can put that on, 1,600 schools, we can put it on 3 pages. Well, that's because it's just the summary. If you go to the website, it would take this much to print out as well. So we're looking at something we might can do that's a shorter summary in the future. I know I met with Ms. Harris and Ms. Martin even this morning, and they're working on that for the future. But this does include surveys and also the praxis test results, including what we call first-time test takers. One of the frustrations you're going to see, I know I've said this in years past, you hear it over and over, is that many of our institutions have such small numbers that they don't get reported because of FERPA. And so it is almost punitive to our big colleges, no offense to my colleagues out there, because all of everything they have, from music to the principalship, gets reported because they have lots of people in all these programs, whereas some of the smaller colleges don't have really anything that gets publicly reported because FERPA kind of covers it. So we're also looking at a way to maybe work on something that's fully transparent around that. So we can't do public data releases around all that. Obviously, you as board members can individually, if you want to reach out to Ms. Martin and look at institutions, you can do that, but we can't publicly because you're on the inside, so you can get un-FERPArized data, but we can't release it. FERPArized, that's the term they use. I didn't make that up. FERPArize the data.
I've never seen that in the dictionary.
Yeah. You can get it un-FERPArized, but we can't present it publicly that way. The most important thing to me, I think most of my higher ed colleagues out there know it, all the people in here at the department do, is I look at that first time pass rate. The second pass rate and third and beyond tells me how good your tutoring programs are. The first time pass rate tells me how good the program is. And so we look at first time pass rate. I really put a lot of focus on that. Remember that we do not get reports from people who never pass the praxis. We only get the ones that ultimately pass it. But we can look at the percentage of first time versus the percentage of those second time or took more than 2 to get there. to see, to kind of judge the quality of the program. So that's something, as you're looking through it, that's something you might want to focus in on. Now with that, Dr. Peacock probably says, I wish you'd let me talk first.
No.
Before you start, and just kind of an editorial comment from my environmentalist friends, we've discussed this before, about documents like this being digitized with an index that we can follow through. And even ChatGPT can help with that. But I appreciate my weightlifting exercise, and I do therapy, but I wouldn't shoot more than just promise, like Ms. West said you promised, commit that when it's possible to digitize, we are in a different era.
Yeah.
And if it were digitized with index, it would be a lot easier for me. And after all, I'm just a poor country boy from Alabama, but thank you very much for
We will work on getting that done. That's on our list.
I'll count on it next year.
I commit to it. We'll get them in
When you don't do it next year, I'll remind you.
I'm sure you will.
Hey, Dr. Reynolds, I'll say, we did have a big discussion about that. The only reason we decided to go with the paper copies, we went back and looked at the report from last year when we presented this, and there were some complaints that people couldn't see all of the data in Assembly.
Some of my kids didn't see it while here.
So that was why we made the
If
decision.
it were digitized, I could have marked it. That's one of the considerations. One of my colleagues said they can't read it without a magnifying glass now, so.
Well, that's my life most of the time too, so I do understand, but that was the reason we did it, was just to try to be sure you could all see everything.
I can't.
Well, I can help you from there too. Okay, so we'll go ahead and go through what is in the institutional report card. You guys have had this presentation before, so you're fairly familiar with the layout of the report card. So we'll go through that and then of course take questions at the end about anything that you may want to ask. Okay, so this is an annual report, as you know. It is a statewide report. The first section that you see in here where it's tabbed, that is the entire state of Alabama. So that would be data from everywhere, all of it included together. So that's a great report and a great resource. Beyond that, then there are individual reports for each of the institutions here in Alabama. So what does this report cover? This particular report covers 3 different things. It covers the certificates that were issued. Now that could be a Class B or it could be an all-day for the dates of August 1, 2022 through July 31 of 2023. So did the person get a certificate, either a bachelor's or an all-day during that time period? The second thing that it covers would be testing data related to that. So tests that were taken between August 1 of 2022 and July 31 of 2023. And then lastly, and this is why the dates are important, the dates for the employer and the teacher surveys, the new teachers. Those dates are a bit different. That would be from August 1 of 23 through July 31 of 24. So it's a year year newer than the information for certificates and testing data. All right, so again, who is included? This would be individuals that completed either a Class B or an all-day program at an Alabama institution and that's an important and, they were issued a professional educator certificate during that reporting period time frame. And just as a caveat here, the individual may have completed the program prior to those years, but maybe they had something that they were still waiting to do. Maybe they hadn't passed a test, maybe they didn't get their fee in, by the time that this particular report ran, whatever the reason. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they completed the program during that time, but that's when the certificate was issued. Okay, for the testing data, that was for the certificates. This would be testing. Again, same beginning. People who have completed either a Class B or an all-day program at an Alabama institution, they were issued a professional educator certificate during that time frame in the reporting period. For the tests, we're looking at 3 different tests this particular reporting period. We have praxis testing, which we've had all along. This will be the first time that we're looking at foundations of reading. If you remember from last year, there were questions, why is foundations of reading not part of this? Because of the way the years rolled, this is the first time that the adoption of foundations of reading falls into the reporting period. So we do have data for that. And then, of course, our Ed TPA, which we've had in past years as well. That's broken down by first attempt pass rate, as Dr. Mackey said, and then those that passed on a second attempt, and then those that passed on 3 or more attempts. Because these people ultimately earned a certificate, we are looking at those who were ultimately successful at their testing, finished what they needed to do, and they were awarded a certificate. So it is truly a report on our institutions of higher education and those that complete that program. Okay, for the survey data, this would be first and second year teachers that completed a Class B or all-day program at an Alabama institution, again focusing on our institutions, and employers of those first and second year teachers. So what is included there? There is a summary of survey categories and percentages for the first and second year teachers, and then also a summary and survey categories and percentages for the employers of those. And if you remember from when we talked about this last year, if I'm in a particular school and I hired 4 new teachers last year, if I am doing what is being asked of me, I'm completing that survey 4 times, once for each of those individual first or second year teachers. All right, just some additional information as you go through all of this that may be helpful. So additional information on our test data. That should say test data. I'm so sorry. That's not correct. Why are there some areas that don't have a number? Well, as we said before, we have to look at FERPA. Numbers are used if there are 5 or more test takers. So on your statewide reports, you're going to see numbers in most every area because we're going to need that 5 or more. With our smaller institutions, we may only have 1 or 2 test takers in a particular area, therefore we can't report that on a public document. We do use the asterisks for areas where people had where we had 1 to 4 test takers. So if you see that, we know that there were tests that were taken, but it wasn't enough to meet that quota. And then, of course, an empty cell would mean we just didn't have anyone at that particular institution that took a test that qualified for this reporting period. Does the report include anyone that did not receive anything other than those that received a certificate from an Alabama institution? The answer to that is no. So this would not be anyone who took a test to add an area through certification based on test. Maybe they have a math degree and certification. They want to add social studies. They go take a test. That's not included on this report. Anyone who comes through like our provisional program where they have a bachelor's in something else and they go through that process. So none of our alternative pathways. This is strictly those who did an educator preparation program. For our surveys, the big question, is the teacher survey limited to those who were certified in the last 2 years? The answer there is no. The survey is for first or second year teachers. They may have gotten their certification 2, 3, 4, 10 years ago, but they are in fact either a first year or a second year teacher regardless of when that certification happened. And how are those surveys disseminated to the employers and the teachers? It's linked to our teacher mentoring program. The surveys are sent out each April. Although we strongly encourage participation, we can't require it. So as you'll see going through there are some areas, particularly with our employers, where we're a little lax on the information provided. The surveys just were not completed. And then, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I wanted to say here before we get to the question period. I'd like to, we've had a change in the mentoring program. Dr. Patience Veronica has retired. And now we have, working with us through mentoring, we have Miss Kimberly Mitchell. She has joined us today, so I'll ask her to stand.
Stand up.
Okay, she has taken this on like a rock star. She's doing an amazing job. But the thing also that we've done is that Ms. Mitchell and I had the opportunity to participate in a meeting the other day with some of our EPPs at the Alabama Commission of Higher Education. And one thing I want to point out here with the survey, some of our teachers may have just completed a program, but they may have started their teaching trajectory through an emergency certified route. Emergency individuals are covered through the mentoring program. And so because of that, their first 2 years in the mentoring program were when they had an emergency certificate, not when they completed their program. And so one of the concerns as we talk this through with higher education is, well, how can we capture all of our people? We are looking at some different ways through administration of this survey so that we can truly get a pool of individuals that are those first and second year completers of programs, and not just individuals who are completing their first and second year of the mentoring program. Because the unfortunate part is that sometimes we miss those recent completers of programs because they began through an alternative route, either through maybe provisional certification and changed over, through emergency and decided to go into an educator prep program. But that does reduce the number of individuals who receive the survey because of the venue that we use to administer the survey. The other thing I wanted to go back to, if you go back just one other slide, please. When we talk about the test data and the number of completers, the other thing that we have to look at when we started discussing this, Ms. Harris, Dr. Peacock, several of us in the office, one of the things we looked at is our report card, even though it's quite voluminous, as Dr. Reynolds pointed out, it's a lot of pages, we still don't have as much information as we'd like to communicate. There are several other variables that we are going to start examining. I talked a minute ago about the ALPI process and some of the documentation required. So some of that documentation that's going to be developed through the ALPI process and required from EPPs will give some information about who these very candidates are. I definitely agree with Dr. Mackey. When we look at first-time password, we're looking at program quality. But as I said a minute ago, an apple is not an orange. It's just not a piece of fruit. And so sometimes those individuals that you begin working with at EPPs, if you understood the context of where they're starting, you would understand why they have to take just a little bit longer to grasp some of the concepts that they are trying to achieve. The one thing we're going to be looking at is a resiliency factor as well. So those who persist, as you said, Dr. Bill, we don't want to lower the standards. We do want to look at persistence though, because something has to be said about that individual that persists despite not being initially successful. And we want to include all of those aspects. Our higher ed partners, as you see, none of them left for this question because they are eager to see what it is that they can examine to show their program quality. How are they lining up? We've adopted some new routes in Alabama, as you all are aware of, and so where do they stack up in terms of how their candidates are performing? We want to look at all of those pieces, and we're going to be eager to revise the report card in the future so that you can see some of those elements as well and have a greater look at the candidates that are completing these programs and going out to serve in our schools.
Any questions?
On the survey, I know last year raised a concern that the percentages, that the teachers naturally came out of their programs, went into the classroom, and felt that they were fully prepared and scored themselves at a certain level, and then there was a discrepancy in maybe how the employer felt about their performance. And so I'll ask again, that data, are we sharing that back to the EPP to show them where there may have been there was an expectation of the employer, but it may not have been communicated to the teacher candidate as they were going through school and then coming into the classroom, or maybe they didn't have as robust experience while they were still a student in the classroom learning, going through that pre-teaching process. So are we sort of drilling down into that to see where we may be thin?
Yes, ma'am. Not only are we drilling into it, many of the institutions have surveys that they have designed that look very similar to these, that they administer to those partner school districts where they have very robust partnerships, because what we are finding as well is that it's an employer survey. So one of the considerations moving forward with the degree design of the survey is necessarily the principal the best person to complete that survey, because many times they are so removed from what that teacher is doing on a day-to-day basis. It may be someone else who would have more knowledge of how that candidate is doing on an everyday basis. The other thing, the EPPs are partnering to develop more qualitative research, as I said. This gives you just a picture of, let me take this survey and fill it out real quick, but to drill down, as you asked about, Ms. West, how do I look at what are those elements that these LEAs really think that we need to enhance to improve our performance. So one of the things that many of the EPPs have done is that for their Cape Standard 4, they looked at having smaller committees where they look at this with LEAs present to sit down and say, this is what this data say, but we want to hear more from you about what is it that we need to improve in our preparation program so that they are better prepared on day one when they come to you. So that's happening organically across the board.
Hopefully in our principal academy, we're emphasizing the fact that principals need to be very close to the classroom and know exactly what is happening with the first and second year. And yes, if you are in a large school, that is no excuse for not knowing exactly what is happening with your first and second and third year teachers. Because I think your seasoned teachers certainly can, if their students are performing at a high level, you can trust them, but I would think that our principals should be the front line. And I understand we can't require that, but that they complete the survey, but I strongly suggest that they complete the survey, and I actually can't understand why they wouldn't.
Many of them would like, for example, one of the comments that we received back is like a grade level administrator. So they may be the head principal and they're receiving the surveys, but it may be a grade level administrator that has more direct contact with these particular teachers that are teaching in the field, and because they are observing them on a more frequent basis. And so one of the considerations that's been asked moving forward is maybe that grade level assistant principal also could be the one that is the completer of this survey. Not to say someone that doesn't have those appropriate credentials, but the one that's closest to the day-to-day work that this new teacher does.
And it's not fair to the new teacher not to have that employer survey provided.
Absolutely.
You know, I realize that they probably get their annual review, but what the survey is asking could be so helpful to that new teacher, maybe to understand that he or she is not quite, meeting the mark in certain areas.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm just thinking of the employee as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I realize that you said that the individual EPPs might do their own surveys, but I guess my concern is on a statewide level, the statement that I saw, although participation is encouraged, it is not required. How then does that affect the EPP program based upon the way we're evaluating them?
And part of it is the way that it is administered. And that's why I was communicating that we're looking at a change to move forward with that. Because through the mentoring program, you just don't have new teachers who are just completing programs. You have new teachers that are in your emergency certified
right now
programs.
it seems punitive, the way it's worded.
You have new teachers that are in the provisional certification and teaching field route. You have them through the career tech, temporary certificates. You have them through all of these various routes. And so those individuals would not be included in this survey. And so the reason we can only say encouraged and not required is because a teacher that's on an emergency, they wouldn't have this data to complete.
I understand that, but it also is like an oxymoron.
Right.
You're expecting me to do this,
right,
but then I'm being held somewhat punitively if it's not done. So I just want us to be aware.
Absolutely.
As we evaluate this, to be aware of that.
Yes, ma'am. And that's one of the reasons we're looking at a different route of administration so that we can capture more of this data and have it as a required field for those that it is administered to.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My understanding, the schools are listed in this alphabetically.
Yes, they should be, yes.
Because, I appreciate it, and I'm being honest with you. This is a lot for me to read, and sort out, and figure out the schools in my district, because they're not listed, they're not indexed. And it's not just that, I'm gonna be honest with you, you seem to not.
I actually, Dr. Reynolds, this may be the fastest I've ever come through on a board request, but they are in your assembly and they're indexed in assembly by school. So it's easy. You can go in, it's a zip file because it's so big, but you click on that zip file and download it, and then you'll see a folder.
So this with you then.
You'll see, you can leave that one here. You'll see an index file, and you can pull each one.
Thank you.
Just leave that one here. we will,
Save my weightlifting.
save,
Thank you.
too bad we didn't save a tree, but it's in your singly and it is
Save
indexed.
it for us.
Yes. But I can't take any credit for that, so we got it done.
You should have said that when I first asked my first question.
Yes. Well, I wanted to make sure it was in there before I said that, but it is in there.
And you may want to save these for the new board members.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That'll be their new gift.
I'm gonna give mine to one of my constituents out there. Athens State, you got one.
Are there any additional questions?
Oh, we're sorry.
My
Sorry, we got off.
job is to use my colleagues.
But thank you, it was very
Thank you.
Thank you, great job.
So, as we move on, you see it looks like a long agenda, but it's really not. I asked Dr. Chess, I said, if we push through, then those of you, I know some of you had commitments this afternoon, we could go to lunch and we wouldn't have to come back. Digital literacy and computer science, you see that list on there. As y'all know, the law says we have to represent every congressional district. We try to evenly represent them. We have a couple, it's District 7 and 5, that are not as well represented because it's hard to line up your districts with congressional districts. But remember, we add appointees, and we work with the governor for the governor's office appointees. And our staff have committed they're going to work to try to fill in those spots when we do those appointees too. So there are board-approved ones, then there are governor appointees, which are confirmed by the Senate, but we actually provide that list also, so we're working on that. And there are even additional appointees that serve to try to make sure you have a comprehensive demographic and geographic representation. So don't be too alarmed by that, but we do have representation from across the state, and there'll be additional on there too. So this is kind of another big one. It's not one of our 4 core, but this is the one that's, in my experience, one of the most difficult because computer science and digital literacy, almost by the time you approve it, it's behind. So it was a thing in university academic circles, but probably not more than 3 people in this room could give a definition for artificial intelligence when the last one was done. And now it is pervasive to everything we do. So they're going to be having to look at that and this whole digital literacy piece and trying to predict not just computer science for today, but what it's going to look like into the 2030s, because this will go into the 2030s. So that committee will start work in February after you, assuming your approval of the committee in January. Have questions, as always, let Ms. Martin know, and we'll get answers to those. So there are a couple other things I just wanted to mention. The main one is we're going to, after the board meeting today, we'll publicly release. But every year we talk about teacher shortages and what are our 5 big areas. So let me read them to you. The 5 largest shortage areas this year, and this is as reported by the districts, you're going to be a little shocked maybe. Number 1 is elementary education, K-6. And number 2 is early education, P3. So our districts reported 551 shortages in elementary ed and 261 in early childhood. And then the next 2, you won't be surprised, were special ed, high school, and then special ed, elementary. And the 5th one was general science. We do have, you remember last year, elementary ed was also our biggest one. And it actually went down this year by about 90. So even though it was 551, it was around 650 last year. So it has gotten some better. One of the big wins is that math is not in the top 5 anymore. And that's largely due to the work y'all have done, the work that the legislature's backed us on in the teams contracts. And general science, even though it's number 5 now, it used to be 2 for a long time, has dropped. It's also dropping, but it has not dropped out of the top 5 like math has. Remember, these are snapshots too. So if I'm a local and I have an opening, and even if I have applicants for that job, but I've not hired somebody yet on that day, then it shows up as a shortage. So it's not, some of those are in the reporting, but when you look at, I mean, after school starts, you've got between early elementary ed and early childhood, we had over 800 openings. That's a lot statewide, and now, so the people out there listening, that does not mean there's a room of children with nobody, no adult. If you're emergency certified, okay, so we may have a teacher in there who's on emergency certificate, but we count that as a shortage because they're not, we want a fully certified person. We may have somebody with an alternative certificate. In some cases, y'all know that short term, they may even hire somebody with a substitute certificate. But again, we still count that as a shortage because if you've got a substitute teacher who's over a class, that is not what we call fully staffed. So we had 800 classrooms with elementary children that did not have a fully certified adult at the front of the room. And that's when we're trying to push literacy and numeracy and all the things we talk about, that's a real concern for us. And so I wanted to make that comment while our higher ed colleagues are still here. I know that's a concern for them too, because as they look at the pipeline of people coming, it is actually growing in our institutions, but it's not growing as fast as we all need it to. So we'll be releasing that publicly, so I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see some news stories about that, but we wanted you to know it first, and we continue to work. We will release it, though, with the full data, which is that they're all getting better, but they are not getting better fast enough to please us all. Now, my colleagues who worked in schools, Ms. Manning, I look at you, Dr. Richardson, and Dr. Reynolds, but everybody, but I can tell you, Ms. Ziegler, when I was an elementary principal, if I had a third grade opening, it was not uncommon to have 40 people apply for that job. And now, superintendents tell me they may have to go out and beat the bush to get an applicant for some of these jobs, especially in some of the underserved parts of the state. So it is an issue we need to continue to address, and thank you to our higher ed partners for helping us address it and get more people through.
But to put it in perspective, Dr. Mackey, 800 classrooms out of how many elementary classrooms are in the state of Alabama?
Oh yeah, tens of thousands. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds a lot dramatic, 800 openings, but some of them are temporary and some of them are transitional.
We have in that
tell me how
group,
many.
we have 800, a little over 800 elementary, some of them are K-8, but elementary mixed intermediate schools.
Yeah. So
that would be an average of one per school. It would, and as you know, that's not going to be, that's not evenly distributed too.
1,000 elementary.
And there are, some of those schools might have, 60 or 70 or 100 units. So yeah, you're exactly right.
Dispersed
percentage-wise, it's small.
Also, they're not equally dispersed over the state.
That's true.
As you said, some of them, and which is good and bad, because some of them are critically dynamically located in certain areas. And I think it's important. Maybe we can get a hot map showing where they are.
Well, but they're not. You're right. They're not equally distributed, and that's certainly our most underserved areas are where we seem to have the most shortages. But I don't have it by district, but I'll ask about that. Y'all, probably with your areas which ones have it.
I just want to be clear. It's important for us to be open to the public what our real problems are and where they are.
And then the last thing I want to mention, Dr. Chestnut, is just kind of the mapping out the next 6 weeks. As y'all know, of course, it's a lot of our staff, and especially our administrative assistants, like Miss Nora. Miss Nora, thank goodness she's here today, but I'm going to pick on her for a minute. We talked on Monday, and she could have left Monday and not come back for the rest of the year because of what they have. Especially our administrative assistants accumulate leave, and if they don't use it by December 31st, it's gone. So she agreed she was going to work with me, and she'd be here every day, and she has been every day, all day, till we get through the meeting. But I probably won't see her again until January 2nd. Now, of course, she's great. She told me, anytime you need to call me, call me. But But I say that's also Leanne, we've got a lot of folks that'll be out. We'll come back on January 2nd, that morning, and we'll probably work all day to pull together the last minute things because your packet has to go out that day because the meeting's on the 9th. So I'm just trying to set expectations that we've already got a draft of it, but we will come back and have a very quick meeting in January because it's the 9th. So it is right after, it's as early as we can have a meeting. Then we'll have the retreat on January 29th. We have set up a, Justice Stewart's going to be with us for our 2 board members who are being resworn and our 2 new ones on the afternoon of the 28th. I have Ms. Ziegler and Dr. Chestnut some invitations for you here. We've got others too if anybody else wants to invite folks. Everybody's obviously invited to that, and we'll get you more information. But the afternoon of the 28th, we have some orientation for the 2 new ones. A swearing-in ceremony, Justice Stewart's going to preside over in the Capitol, a reception afterward, and then we'll have dinner. Okay, so a break, and then just an unprogrammed dinner, and then the retreat the next day, and we're working through the schedule for that. We're really going to focus on, we've talked about this, some of y'all have asked, but on numeracy and literacy updates. Where are we? What are the upcoming deadlines? What's the upcoming schedule? So those kinds of things. Obviously, that'll be the week before the legislature starts, so we'll spend some time talking about where we are then with pre-filed bills and budget, and that'll be the 29th. And then we'll have our two board members who are rotating off. Will be with us in January. People sometimes they don't get confused about that. Sometimes the public does because inauguration day is not until after our January meeting. So they will be with us in January, and we'll have very special recognitions for both of these wonderful board members. And so that's kind of just the layout for the next 6 weeks. I just kind of want that to be in your mind. We have a schedule. Mr. Markins worked the schedule. There will be an administrator in charge every day. You can certainly call me or call him anytime you have questions over the holidays. But if you say, I want to generate such and such report, it will take longer to get it between now and the 1st of January because there are just so many folks that we'll have to work around. And that's it, Dr. Chestnut.
Looks like we will finish before lunch. We have any other comments?
Well, I have 2 questions. One question is, are we as a Board of Education looking at some kind of cut score for the Numeracy Act or some kind of guideline? Are we looking at that?
So there's not a holdback provision like there is in the Literacy Act. But yes, we're looking at those proficiency scores, and Dr. Anderson will talk about that when we meet in January. But so assigning the principals, assigning the coaches is purely based on the math outcome for those schools. So we're looking at their proficiency levels, and then also we're working hand in hand with our school improvement team because, again, we're identifying schools for school improvement based on their English language arts and math outcomes. But you're seeing a lot more focus, and especially inner city areas where we have the lowest performance in math. And then we will kind of work our way out, and she'll show you that in the coaching model too, how the schools with the most need are getting the coaches first, but it's the proficiency level is where we're looking at that.
And those recommendations will come based upon what T and her team have looked at.
That's right. So they'll look at it, and they have to look at it. Obviously, it's the 3rd grade reading is a little more concise because you look at one grade, one score. But with math, the way the law is written, we have to look at their K through 5. Second, we start testing 2nd grade, but really 2 through 5 performance. So she has some kind of metric where they do an average in there. They are again, she'll come to a full update next month, but everything's on track with numeracy except one piece, and that's the higher ed. The law says we should have it's not higher ed's fault, a Foundations of Mathematics test, like we have the Foundations of Reading, but there's not a Foundations of Mathematics test in existence. We did an RFI. We had 2 or 3 vendors respond. The Elementary Math Task Force rejected all the responses. So we're in a process of reissuing the RFI. And so we're a little behind, but again, if we can't approve something we don't have, then they're going to tweak it and help the test companies understand better what we're looking at, what we want out of that test. And she'll be able to talk more to that next month too.
Well, I remember back, you were talking about back when you were principal, I remember back then too, and we had the reading initiative started, and those schools that did great, we took away their reading coach because they were doing great. Well, you know what happened after that. They slid again. So I hope that we'll be able to provide something that prevents that.
Yes, ma'am.
With
We
the
do not
math?
plan to take coaches away. Under the Literacy and Numeracy Acts now, that was one of the things we are protected from. Even if you score really well, your coach doesn't get moved into somewhere else.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
That
Good
sounds
question.
good. Well, and two, in reference, we didn't say anything about your evaluation. Congratulations.
So thank you very much.
That was a very good evaluation. You set us. You kind of put us on the national stage with your position in the nation. So thank you very much.
Y'all are my focus. I appreciate it.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Board members, I have some good news to share with you. I shared it with Dr. Chestnut and Dr. Mackey, but I was notified by the Boys and Girls Clubs of America. Every year they select one Boys and Girls Club to honor the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And this year, that national award is coming to Alabama for the first time, to the East Alabama Boys and Girls Clubs of America.
Yay.
And so that's all. So the national office is sending down a huge delegation for a weekend celebration. And so I want to congratulate the executive director, Richard Curry, who is, I think, in a board member meeting right now. But I want to congratulate them, and I just want to say, I think what stood out to the national organization is that they have had a massive focus on literacy in their after-school programming, and so they have really taken on the things that we have said are very important at the K-12 level and have been pushing that out in their clubs. And so now this organization is sort of moving into other communities. So Troy and Tuskegee are the two, and then working some down in Dothan with those folks. So I just congratulate the Boys and Girls Clubs of East Alabama today, and I wanted to share that with y'all.
That's great.
Thank you.
Right.
Anything else? Anyone else? If not, the meeting is adjourned.
Big Christmas lunch, so everybody will have to.
Merry Christmas, everybody.